Gentlemen, the main aim of this session is to get you and me familiar with grabbing images from the web and importing snaps, mostly of AK men from our stash of photographs. We'll build on stuff we've touched on already, but there are 1,001 ways of enhancing images and applying effects, certainly more than I'm familiar with, or could possibly teach you if I were. Once you're confident with basics, you can happily explore these yourself. By the way, I'm going to carry on putting the little red labels in for action in the script, but I've gotten rid of the annoying noise in the actual recording. So, firstly, create another folder within your main folder for this introductory course and label it Session 03. While you're at it, create a preset A4 portrait page in Elements and establish a vertical central guide and save it as 2026 Newman Hall or some such. We're going to produce a flyer based on a real future gig. The details are as follows: the Newman Hall, Westbury-on-Trim, BS9 4DR, 11th of April 2026, 7:30 p.m. £15 tickets from us. This set of facts is known as a brief, as in a briefing such as generals and barristers receive. Bearing in mind what we covered in the last session, it's important to encourage briefings to be brief. Well arranged, the wording on a flyer speaks for itself. It doesn't need a wordsmith to obscure it with embroidery. For example, we start at 7:30. We don't need to state 7 p.m. for 7:30 or mention when the doors open. Keen, newly elected briefers may insist on this weird convention, and so occasionally I'll concede and tighten resistance gradually. See Boiling Frogs. Now, the time of the bar opening is a different matter. I'm going to take you through how I might approach producing a flyer for this gig, and you may find it helpful to follow along practically with this as I explain it. Afterwards, I'm going to invite you to have a go at producing a flyer of your own for a future gig. I'll say more about this at the end of the video, but bear in mind this will be your first venture out. Don't expect too much from yourselves. Wear knee pads and ask questions. There's no single correct route. Wheelies come later. Okay, I generally begin with the presumption that I'll divide my page into three. The top section containing our name and a strapline, the middle and largest section containing the main image, and the bottom section containing the essential information and QR. These are guidelines, not rules. And like all guidelines, they're there to be ignored once you've mapped their underpinnings. I really wouldn't worry about this approach producing formulaic results. The flyer has to be attractive, but does not need to be an original piece of fine art. Arguably, the more recognizable the format of an organization's advertising, the more effective it is. So, I have a preconception of the general layout of my flyer, but that doesn't help me make a start. If we're sharing the bill with another choir, I search their online stuff, websites, Facebook, etc. Occasionally, images leap out at you. Here are some examples. Sarsaparilla had this snap of them lined up at Stour Head, I think it is. Apart from being a reasonably unblurry snap to work with, choir snaps are often very poor quality. This image arranged the choir in a line rather than in a performance clump, which inspired the strapline "line up with" and gave me an opportunity to use Darren's head wetting, which I'd spotted on the web some time before. The absurd poses, kingfisher and fish, suggested themselves. Dealing with two choirs in performance formation on one flyer is a pain. This second example was entirely based on a detailed concept for the image from Kevin, who thought up the idea of a schoolmaster, blackboard, and pupil with a stick of chalk to alter UK to AK. It also gave me an opportunity to deal less boringly with another static image of choristers in performance formation. This third is a more recent example from our trip up north. Absent Bob asked the small group we sang with in Lancaster to send us some snaps for the flyer. Fortunately, they were only a handful of singers, so I didn't have to give equal weight to boring, distant clumps in performance. However, the snaps they sent were all smiley and gave no clue as to their real character. Happily, I found the quirky one I used on their Facebook page. It fitted right in. If I'm really stuck, which is very frequently, I start by finding images of venues. Sometimes these are inspiring. Often they're just something relevant to put in the background. An inspiring example was when I found this aerial view of St. Peter's, which sent me searching for an air balloon and basket to put us in. Less inspiring were the respective village halls of Minety and Purton. In both cases, I had to rely on the recorded imaginative poses of AK men, which, incidentally, is an essential, precious resource worth renewing regularly. The Newman Hall falls into the uninspiring category, sadly. I usually use Google to find images. In the old days, I could drag them off onto my desk straight away. These days, I get images as large as possible on my screen and then take a screenshot. In my case, that's Shift plus Command plus 3. Your method is a bit more elaborate, I think, unless you've got a dedicated button for the job. Next, open the screenshot in Photoshop Elements, draw a rectangular marquee around the snap of the hall, and go to Image Crop. Now select all, Command A, Copy, Command C, and clicking on the tab in the tab bar and using the keystroke Command V, paste it into your 2026 Newman Hall file. Selecting the Move tool, that's the plus sign, resize the image to fit the top of the page. Note, I should say something here about copyright. I'm no expert on the law, but unquestionably to take someone's creative work wholesale and without permission is theft, especially if you stand to gain money, that's sell tickets, by using it. However, I'll often borrow the odd item, hat, umbrella, kookaburra, balloon, gull, sky, reindeer, or jackhammer, in the sincere belief that nobody could reasonably claim that our entire gig relied on using it, and in the additional belief that the owners of the original snap are very unlikely to be geared up for such detailed monitoring of their images, and or that they would put their legal department onto putting a stop to amateur singing groups using snaps of their gents' black umbrella range. You can always colour it red too. Having said that, the late lamented Chas Wright, who founded the Ewley Brewery, once made a brew he called Ale of Ewley, only to receive a threatening letter from Oil of Ewley. He challenged them to sue. They didn't. They would have had a hard time demonstrating that their skin moisturizer product profits could have ever been damaged by an amber beer from a microbrewery. I suppose they could have claimed that their cosmetics reputation might have been tarnished by late-night drunken debauchery in Ewley. I always use my pilfered images respectfully, just in case. Now, download to your Session 3 folder the file Rondo Flyer PSD, which you'll find in our new Google Group folder. Open the file in Elements, and you should find it is imported with all its layers. Now duplicate the Newman Hall layer you imported, because we're going to be doing some alterations to it, and we need to keep a copy safely in case of calamity. Lock the original layer, that's the padlock icon at the top of the layer column, and click on the eye icon to render it invisible. Turning to the foreground and background color overlapping squares below the Tools menu, double-click on the foreground, that's the uppermost square. Ignore the color picker, which pops up, and moving the cursor away from it, you'll see its end transforms into an eyedropper. Move this to the light green of the lawn and click on it to sample it. Next, double-click on the background square and select one of the darker greens in the image. You'll find them in the bushes next to the hall itself. Do this in the same way. Note, make sure that the color is distinctly dark green and not so dark as to appear black. Select the background bottom layer in the layer column and click on the Create New Layer icon, that's the single page icon, at the top. You should now have a new layer between the background and the Newman Hall layers. Label this new layer Gradient. In the left-hand tool menu, go down to Draw and select the Gradient tool, which is a square icon shaded left to right from dark to light tones. This tool allows you to draw a gradient with the foreground and background colors at either end. You simply drag the tool along the area where you wish to create the gradient. Note, the gradient will be applied to the whole layer unless you have a specific area crawling with ants, which will confine the gradient. In our case, we're applying it to the whole layer. You don't have to settle for the first results. For as long as you have the tool selected, you can drag it across as many times as you want until you're happy with the result. You can click on the double-headed arrow between the two squares to swap the colors round. It's not a tool you'll use frequently, but it's very useful when you need it. Referring back to the last session, it can be an effective way of enhancing a heading once you've rasterized the text and used the magic wand to select the lettering. In this case, I have two aims in mind. Firstly, I want to get rid of the wide path in the image, which ends abruptly in a straight edge and is distracting. And secondly, I want to place some AKs on the grass, and I want a darkish background so they won't appear to be floating, without me spending time adding shadows to anchor them to the ground. I therefore want the greens to closely match the light lawn color and become darker lower down. Because I want a vertical rather than a slanted gradient, I can use the Shift key to constrain the tool in the vertical plane. As a rough guide, we can adjust it later if necessary. Start your tool level with the lower sill of the ground floor windows, and with the Shift key pressed, drag it down and release it at about the same distance beyond the bottom edge of the image. That's the image, not the page. Note, you don't have to drag across the whole image to fill the layer. Now select the visible Newman Hall copy layer and select the Eraser tool from the Draw menu. In the menu below, make sure Brush is selected in the Type column. That's the type of eraser, not type as in text. In the Brush menu, scroll down and select Airbrush 300. This gives the eraser a soft airbrush action. 300 pixels is too small for what we want, so type in 800 pixels in the size box and 80% in the opacity box. Lowering the opacity makes the erasure less harsh, more forgiving, and allows more control. Now use the eraser to carefully blend in the light grass area and get rid of the path. When you're happy, save your work. We're now going to add some men. You'll notice at the top of your page, just above the horizontal ruler, you have 3 tabs. One is the main 2026 Newman Hall page you're working on. Another is the cropped image of the hall from the screenshot. And the third is the Rondo flyer. We're now going to be moving back and forth between your main page and the Rondo, transferring men from the latter to the former. Click on the Rondo tab to open it. You'll notice amongst the several layers are 3 layer groups. Click on the arrow to open the group named Men. Each man is named, and if you click on his layer with the Move tool, that's the positive, the plus sign, selected, he should appear in a blue rectangle with handles. If you now copy that layer and click on the Newman tab, you can now paste him into your page. Remember, where he's pasted depends on what layer you selected before pasting. So in this case, your uppermost Newman Hall layer needs to be selected as you want the men to appear in front of it. Of course, you can always change the layer order if you forget, and the layer's original name will come with it, so you should easily keep track of them. Note, some men you may find are not entire, having lost body parts in previous struggles. You will soon have access to whole versions of our photo shoots in Strad. Naturally, you'll want to click on our glorious leader first. But don't be alarmed if he appears to have a third hand, which he leaves behind. This is because he has a separate hand which has been adjusted to make his grasp of the coat of arms look slightly more plausible. Speaking of layer names, you'll see several in the Rondo are simply labeled with a small dash. These are layers where I've added shadows to tone down or obliterate flesh, which I felt was too obtrusive. If this had been a single posed photograph instead of a multiple collection of individual ones, shadows would have taken care of themselves by and large. You can toggle the eye icons to see what these layers do, and hopefully you'll agree that they improve matters. They are, of course, just a few examples of the work that you will invest in creations that are unnoticed and therefore unappreciated and taken for granted by an indifferent lay public. So, we need to create an amusing arrangement of men on the lawn. AD holding the word sheet is from a snap by a wag. I'm afraid I've forgotten who exactly, but I use it frequently because it allows me to stick in start times and occasionally other stuff. If you want to use AD, be sure to select the Kicks Off layer with it using the Shift key before copying. You can edit this text, which is impact font, and use the Move tool if you need to resize it to fit. Use the Shift key if you need to change its proportions, that is, to make it slightly wider without adjusting its height. Press Shift as you move a handle sideways. Vice versa, of course, to change the height. When you've added your men, select them all and AD's text and group them into a group layer named Men. Now create a new layer above the Men group layer and draw a rectangle across the page to the bottom, which will be filled with black and will become the background for the main information. Using Impact, add color, adjust and arrange the menu, tickets, date and times, info in the black text rectangle. Open, copy and paste the QR also. This and the black background rectangle can be grouped I've labeled mine Info. Create our name banner and strap using the same method as you did in session 2, but try altering the color and width of stroke. Group together as heading. Note, I think mine would have been improved if I'd split our name into 3 lines instead of 2, so as to make it fill the space bigger and better. I want to darken the top of the Newman Hall image so that our name stands out more. To do this, duplicate the layer, which automatically becomes Newman Hall Copy 2, and go to Enhance at the top and scroll down to Adjust Lighting and then to Levels. In the Levels menu, move the left-hand slider in the Input menu to the right to Taste. Alternatively, put in a value of around 170 in the box below it. Now select the eraser and using the same brush size and opacity as before, remove the dark layer just below the banner lettering, following the arc of the black shadow of the strap line. Don't forget Undo and Command Z and History if you don't get it right first time. Now create a new layer between the Men group and the dark Newman Copy 2 layer. Label this layer Frame. In this layer, we're going to create a black frame around the edge of the page. Frames can be an effective design element, as in the Rondo flyer, for example, but they can also facilitate an important technical function known as bleed, which we'll be looking at the end of these sessions. Bleed is an area outside the finished size, that's to say the cropped size of the flyer. Usually printers require a bleed of 3 millimeters or so. And the idea is that if the guillotine is not perfectly accurate when they're cropping, it won't result in the paper being visible. For similar reasons, it's advisable not to place important items such as text within 3 millimeters of the edge of an image. In fact, most printers are very accurate with their cropping these days. Nevertheless, a bleed is a sound insurance. In our case, with the frame we're about to put in, our entire bleed would need to be black all round, which simplifies matters. To help construct the frame, we're going to use guides. Enlarge the image so that you can see the top of the image clearly. I can use Command plus and Command minus to zoom in and out. Note that the top and sides of the image coincide with the 0 on the rulers. Drag guides down from these rulers and set them to form a 3 millimeter border around the top and sides. Don't worry about the bottom. Now, with the frame layer selected, draw a rectangle exactly within the guides you've just drawn. Go up to Select and click on Inverse. Go up to Edit and Fill Layer Black. You should now have a black frame around the image, and we shouldn't be far off having a serviceable flyer. Don't forget to save. Looking at mine, the heading still doesn't stand out enough, so I've selected the Newman Hall Copy 2 layer and darkened the levels much further. Slightly better. I've also corrected the typo in Newman, which you've been dying to point out to me. I'm thinking next we'll schedule some time for individual study and exploration before going on to another and possibly final guided group session. As part of your self-led homework, I suggest you look through our archives of past gigs flyers to see if anything intrigues, horrifies, or puzzles you. I can supply you with PSD files of most of the flyers, and you can download them to Elements and see how their layers are put together. You can also go to our calendar and have a stab at producing future flyers for some gigs yourself. Familiarity through practice is the only way to get really competent. You have to do that yourselves, but I'm hoping you'll be happy to share your progress and share your thoughts and discoveries and insights on the journey. For this session, at Peter's suggestion, we're moving all our stuff to this archive folder, which gives us more capacity and which we can build into a shared graphics resource to which we can all contribute and plunder. I'll add an assets folder as well as these scripts files. And we'll put stuff into that we're going to be needing, things like logos, QRs, photo shoots of men, and of course stuff for the web. Sort of things that we're going to be needing most of the time. We'll be able to add and copy stuff from this archive. Hopefully, too, you'll be willing to post your work to this site so we can share and constructively encourage each other's work and progress. Very nearly our final formal session will be about preparing the files we create in Elements for the printers. Sadly, we can't do this final stage in Elements, and we will need to use a different program called Canva, which has been recommended by our printer, to do the conversion. The good news is that it's free. The bad news is that I'm totally unfamiliar with it. We've all got homework to do. Cheers, lads, and thanks for sticking with this. Let me know if you've any problems. Don't suffer alone.